Today, it's my absolute privilege to introduce Dr. Fei-Fei Li, professor at Stanford. However accomplished you think Fei-Fei is, she's much more accomplished than that. She's been a VP at Google, the board director at Twitter. I know her best for having spearheaded ImageNet and then done some of the pioneering work on deep learning for vision and ConvNet back around like 2014 and even before that. And I think of her as one of the people who was, let's say, open-minded enough to jump on deep learning, or rather recognize the possibility of deep learning, but also coming from this sort of tradition beforehand when we had methods that sort of had all sorts of interesting structure before them, and then managing to find the best of both worlds. So without further ado, please take it away, Fei-Fei.
Thank you. Thank you. Believe it or not, it's my first time in Toronto. So I'm very, very honored and excited, frankly, to be at the Vector Institute. And so I'll be giving this talk that is a little bit of a longitudinal view of what my lab and my students and collaborators have been doing over the past years. It's meant to be a fairly general audience. I understand most of you are actually AI graduate students. So please feel free to just stop me and have a conversation and be interactive. This is definitely not meant to be a lecture of any sort. So in the context of AI, the great awakening in the past few months and the whole public discourse of what AI is and what it means for to the world, the title of my talk gives a human perspective of AI, and especially the branch of AI I work in, which is computer vision. So I'm going to go back in history a little bit. And when I say history, I want to bring you to 540 million years ago. So a little bit further back. And what does Earth look like around that time? Simple organisms live in a primordial soup. And I say they're simple because they pretty much just float around and do practically nothing. When food comes by, they grab it, but it's not a very complex life because they don't have much going on in them. They don't see, they don't hear, they don't think, they don't actively move around till a moment in history that is a short 10 million years, between 540 million years to 530 million years, what zoologists would call the evolution of the Big Bang of evolution, the Cambrian explosion. Fossil studies show during Cambrian explosion, the number of animal species just exploded. And there are many theories trying to explain why we have this Big Bang of evolution, going from the climate change to the chemical composition of the ocean and all that. But one of the leading theory by an Australian zoologist, Andrew Parker, says the Cambrian explosion is triggered by the sudden evolution of vision, which set off an evolutionary arms race where animals either evolved or died. In other words, the first light entered the animal body, and when animals could actively see light, their relationship with the rest of the world profoundly changed. When you actually can receive data, receive information of the surrounding, you become proactive in the way you live your life. You seek food, you pray, you hide, you do many other things. Indeed, evolution has since then been on a course of developing nervous system, developing more and more intelligent species till we get to humans. And in fact, almost all animals in nature, apart from a few exceptions, live with vision as one of the primary sensory systems. And vision, as well as visual intelligence, is a cornerstone of animal and human intelligence. And when I say visual intelligence, I mean using vision to understand, to navigate, to interact with the world, with the other animals and humans in the world. We survive, we entertain, we communicate, we work, we do many, many things with vision. So that was the brief history of nature with vision. What is the history of computer vision? Well, urban legend says computer vision is a much younger field. One of the story is that in the summer of 1960s, an MIT professor started this summer vision project that is intended as an attempt to use our summer workers effectively in construction of a significant part of the visual system. So the history of AI, as well as history of computer vision, is always this way. We have a clear sight of what we want to do, but we tend to underestimate how long it will take us. In this case, it's conjectured to be one summer. Well, 60 years later, many summers have passed. We have not fully solved the problem of computer vision, but it has gone a long way. If you look at what vision is today, it goes beyond, our wildest imagination in the field of computer vision, whether we're talking about self-driving cars or image understanding or, generative AI, generative vision, many things are blossoming. So the rest of the talk is really a little bit of a overview of where have we come from and where are we heading to. And towards this huge blossoming world of AI, what value should we carry as we head towards the future empowered by AI? So I organized this talk in 3 major chunks. First, we start with building AI to see what humans see. Then we get into building AI to see what humans don't see. And then we get into building AI to see what humans want to see. So we'll start with building AI to see what humans see. Much of my own career and many of the important problem of our field is actually driven by important findings as well as important ideas coming from cognitive and neuroscience. Even as way back as in the 1970s and 80s, cognitive neuroscientists and psychologists have pointed some really important North Star for the field of computer vision. For example, there's a series of studies that start to inform us, give us the insight on how important, how robust, how fast human visual system is in object detection. In this early experiment called RSVP, MIT's Molly Potter and her colleagues show that if they ask human subjects to detect a object, which is a human, in one of the frames, most of you probably will see it, right? You've never seen this video. The frames are refreshed at 10 hertz. So you've only got that particular frame for 100 milliseconds, and you don't know what the human looks like, where it is, the gesture, the appearance, yet you have no problem in detecting that. In fact, if you start to measure, put electrodes around your skull and start to measure the ability of humans to categorize complex objects, such as animals versus non-animals, Simon Thorpe and his colleagues found that 150 milliseconds after the onset of the signal, our human brain gives a very clear differential signal of images that you can separate this. You can separate images of animals from images of non-animals. This is the first time that humans are able to put an actual number in terms of the speed of visual processing. Not only were robust, not only were fast, but we also have neural correlates for objects. Again, some group of MIT neurophysiologists have found using fMRI studies that in our human brain, we have dedicated areas for important tasks in visual recognition, whether it's faces or places or body parts and other things. So all this is a quick way of summarizing an important emerging topic around the turn of the century for the field of computer vision, which is object recognition. It is a fundamental building block for visual intelligence for humans, and it must be a fundamental building block for machines. So, of course, for this audience, I don't need to educate you what is object recognition? A simple definition is, given a picture, can you tell what the object is in the picture? And you would appreciate, all of you, mathematically, it's actually a really tough problem. There is infinite possibilities rendered on 2D pixels given a 3D object living in the world, whether it's lighting, texture, camera angles, background clutter, occlusion and self-occlusion, and all that. So whether you're a human or a computer, you have to take 2D pixels like this and infer what this information is, what this object is in the real world. So the journey towards object recognition started way back in the last century, and I would group the attempt in 3 distinct eras. The first era of attempting the problem of object recognition, which is a North Star of computer vision, is what I call hand-designed features and models. During that time, starting in the 70s and 80s, computer scientists start to conjecture that all the world's objects can be summarized in geometric shapes configured in specific ways. So there are many attempts such as geom theories, generalized cylinder, parts and springs, all these models where researchers pretty much design parts of objects by hand, parameterize them by hand, and try to configure them almost by hand, and try to use those kind of models to recognize real world objects. Very beautiful mathematical theories, obviously didn't go very far. The second phase of object recognition is where machine learning got introduced. This is a very, very vibrant era of research where researchers use hand-designed features. Those of you old enough probably still remember things like SIFT and logs. A lot of young students probably have never heard of them, but those are hand-designed features. But statistical machine learning models, whether we're talking about BaseNet, support vector machines, Ada boost, or conditional random field, all these statistical machine learning models became the lingua franca of computer vision, and we start to learn, use machines to learn. This is the beginning of the major blossoming of machine learning era. Another thing that's really important that happened during this time is actually data, especially internet. Before the 21st century, it is very, very hard to get data. You can almost consider those animals living in the primordial soup of the ocean. If they didn't develop eyes, they don't have the sensory input of the world, and it's hard to learn what the world is about. Without data, we're in the dark. So the internet brought us data, and one of the major efforts in the field of computer vision at the turn of the century is putting together data sets to both train and benchmark. And I grew up in an era that we're using, the whole global computer vision community was using about 20 object classes made by a group of European computer vision scientists and a few thousand or a couple of tens of thousands of images that we use that for training, for benchmarking. And it was really, it was actually a very vibrant period when computer vision was taking off. But one thing that is really important to recognize, going back to the North Stars by our cognitive psychologists, is that the world of vision is much more diverse, complex, and larger. So psychologists like Irving Biederman have estimated that humans by age 6 recognize about 30,000 visual categories. And that's about 13 categories per day, and learning at a really fast speed. Yet, we as a field, we're working on data sets, and the world of vision we give to our computers were tiny compared to what humans are experiencing. And that was really the motivation for the ImageNet project, is that data is as much of a first-class citizen as algorithm is the other part of the huge puzzle that we have to piece together in terms of driving machine learning algorithms. And of course, the rest is history. You guys all know that ImageNet was the data set that powered a fairly classic class of algorithm called convolutional neural network. I'm going to skip this. This is for general audience. So by the time we're well into the end and the beginning of the second decade of 21st century, we enter the third phase of what I would call computer vision and object recognition, which is instead of hand designing features and learning models, we have an end-to-end model that can learn both the feature representation of the visual world as well as the end task, such as object recognition. And that has really opened the floodgate of deep learning, very much from right here in Toronto, actually, in a building not very far from here. With that kind of neural network algorithm, we start to actually recognize objects in the wild, such as these examples that I show. And of course, the defining moment that all of you should be very proud to know happened right here in University of Toronto was Jeff Hinton and his students entered the ImageNet challenge in 2012. And I have personal recollections of the day that we processed 2012 ImageNet challenge and the phone call I got from one of my students letting me know that a very old algorithm won the ImageNet challenge, and we went to look at what has been done, and I called Alex and invited him to actually ECCV Florence 2012 to discuss this work. So it's been 10 years, but that moment in history is personal, very personal to me and to this world we're in, and that's really the beginning of the deep learning revolution. And since then, multiple winning algorithms of ImageNet challenge have defined and redefined the way that computer vision, the field of computer vision, and no matter how I try to be up to date of these figures, I just cannot catch up with the development of these algorithms, especially visual recognition algorithms built upon ImageNet. And my team and I are deeply humbled that ImageNet become part of the driving force of the tremendous progress in the field of computer vision, and as well as part of the deep learning revolution that not only took academia by storm, but it's clearly taking the rest of the world by storm. But as computer vision researchers, our work didn't stop at ImageNet. Actually, one of the very natural questions to ask is what is beyond the kind of object recognition that ImageNet was trying to do. Here's an example. If I use the best object detectors in the world trained by ImageNet and look at two pictures and recognize there's a person and a llama, you would think these two pictures are pretty much the same. But the truth is that they tell very different stories. So what happens is, again, as psychologists have already shared with us that human visual recognition goes far beyond just the discrete listing of object categories. For example, relationships are essential. It's essential for human visual memory. It's essential for human visual understanding. It's essential for many, many downstream tasks. So shortly after ImageNet, my students, Ranjay Kushna and colleagues start to build this a new representation for visual world, which is what we call scene graph of visual relationships. For example, in this image, that the scene graph is composed of entity nodes in pink These are the nouns, and which is the objects of the scene, but as well as attribute notes in purple, which describe the nouns, such as color, texture, and those things, adjectives and adverbs mostly, and then pairwise relationships and predicates, such as these blue boxes describing the geometric relationship, actually, or verb relationship, and all that. So putting together visual genome, we pulled 100K images from actually the COCO data set, and just curated this massive visual relationship data set. And one of the projects was learning human visual relationships. One of the challenges of visual relationships is that they are there are infinite many relationships, even given just a smaller list of objects. So we cannot just naively scale the number of training data. For example, relationships like horse wearing hat is intrinsically long tail and rare events. So we have to learn to compose the visual scene and use the scene graph representation to do this kind of composable learning so that we can enable zero-shot or few-shot learning. And this is just one example of doing zero-shot learning by learning typical relationships and compose new relationships. And during the time of the publication, the quantitative evaluation was pretty good. Of course, we went beyond just discrete visual relationship understanding. Some of you might remember there was a very exciting period shortly after the Hinton image that AlexNet was the visual captioning and storytelling. And my students like Andre Kapathy and Justin Johnson have been doing did quite a bit of work in the early days of image captioning and storytelling. Frankly, this was the first time I personally feel that I underestimated the progress of the field, because a few years before this, I was just finishing my grad school and I felt my lifelong dream as a computer scientist or computer vision researcher is at the end of my career, I would be able to caption the story of an image. And that happened less than 10 years after I graduated from grad school. So that's the progress, the speed of progress in our field. But there's more to visual recognition. In fact, dynamic relationships, such as in videos, multi-object, multi-actor relationship is still an ongoing research. This is our NeurosCience paper just last year, looking at these kind of very complex relationships in videos, and this is the ongoing work we are doing called MOMA, multi-object, multi-actor. I also want to say that in addition to the line of object recognition work our field has engaged in, and my own lab is very much actively engaged in, the field of computer vision has been very exciting, given the deep learning revolution. Of course, 3D vision is on the rise. This year's CVPR statistics shows 3D is the first topic, the most popular topic in this year's CVPR, coming a full cycle to those of us who began our career when 3D was on the decline. And of course, visual recognition has gone into a whole different level of granularity, such as the dense pose estimation, semantic segmentation, as well as generative AI these days. So for the first part of this talk, what I want to show you is that data, compute, and neural network algorithms ushered in the deep learning revolution in AI, and very proudly, most people would consider beginning in the field of computer vision. But for me, and hopefully for many of you, AI's development has always been, and will continue to be inspired by brain science and human cognition. As an AI scientist, my North Star tends to be aligned with what the cognitive scientists have inspired us to show the capability of human vision. And many students and research collaborators have been involved in this part of the work. So now let's go forward and talk about pushing AI beyond human abilities. In fact, human vision doesn't stop at ImageNet, as many classes as there seem to be. Even the simple picture shows, I don't know about you, I cannot name all the dinosaurs here, as some of the kids might. And so it turns out there are 10,000 species of birds, and very, very few humans on Earth can recognize all these bird species. So fine-grained recognition, it pushes beyond ImageNet, and it's a really practically important area of research. This is some early work my students and I did in fine-grained recognition. And this bar chart just shows you, as you come down from the generic category level to the fine-grained level, our recognition algorithms capability just goes down. And I don't think this is a solved problem yet. One of my favorite work is by Tim Lee when she was my graduate student, that we categorized 3,000 types of cars manufactured after 1970s. These are make, model, year. So it's not just about Toyota, it's about Toyota Camry 2004. And we downloaded millions and millions of images from Google Street in 200 American cities across all 50 states. We used a fine-grained object recognition algorithm to categorize all the cars on the street. And what is really interesting is suddenly computer vision becomes a lens into our society. You can use car recognition results to correlate census data and find deep correlation of things like education level, voting patterns, crime rates, environments, and many, many different aspects of our society. So vision in itself is an interesting field, but it's also a tool, a lens, and a way to look into our society and look into who we are. So I started this talk by telling you how amazing human vision is. Now I'm going to tell you that not quite. For example, here's a Stroop test. Many of you know this visual illusion. Read to yourself, top to bottom, left to right, the color of the word, not the word itself, and go as fast as you can. Okay, it's kind of hard, right? You would struggle a little bit. Well, here's another visual illusion that if you have seen it, it's no longer that cool, but if you haven't, this is called change blindness. These two alternating pictures have one thing that's changed. Raise your hand if you see the change. Okay. The rest, this is an IQ test. So just kidding. Okay, now you see the engine of the airplane. It's a huge part. There's no way to explain that the pixel didn't land on your retina. This is a huge part of the picture. But because of the visual attention is wired in our human brain, we actually miss a lot of things. So we don't see fine-grained objects very well, or at least we don't recognize them very well. We don't see objects sometimes in front of us, and we have a hard time managing visual attention. All this sounds fun, but it's no longer fun when there's life and death, where it's human lives at stake. In fact, medical error is one of the leading causes of American death in our hospitals and healthcare systems. And we all know, for example, in a modern surgery room, that tracking instruments and devices is critical for the success of the surgery. If there is a device missing, and typically it's not a giant scissor, it's some suture needles or some gauze, or if they're missing, the surgeon has to stop the surgery and wait for the nurses and the clinicians to account for the object. And there is estimation of sometimes this wait can be as long as more than 1 hour. And think about the risk the patient is taking. So fine-grained object recognition to help our surgeons to track. Oh, and then what do people do these days? Well, you do it by hand. You try to track all the objects by hand. So in a collaboration with Stanford Hospital, we are piloting ideas of using fine-grained object recognition to continuously track small objects live in their surgical room to help the surgeons and nurses to continue to track objects. So that's a combination of using fine-grained object recognition algorithm as well as overcoming humans' attention issues. Let's continue on visual illusion. Sometimes not seeing is more profound than just the lack of visual attention. In this case, pay all the attention you can to square A and B. You still have a visual illusion here, because if I tell you if A and B are exactly the same grayscale value, if you look at the original picture, it is just so hard to believe. Till you look at here, I put the grayscale value bar here, you're probably convinced they are. So visual vision is interesting in that way. Sometimes our bias is hardwired to the point we cannot overcome. Here's another example for those of you who are old enough. Do you recognize who they are? You do? Okay. Clinton and Gore, right? Is it really Clinton and Gore? They're actually Clinton and Clinton, right? So if you look at these two faces, they're the same, yet all the context, our primed understanding of this visual thing, of these people, of their hair, and all that gives us a lot of bias. So as vision becomes more powerful, visual bias has become a serious issue, not just from a technical point of view, but more importantly from a social point of view. So poet and computer scientist Joy Buolamwini wrote this beautiful poem called Ain't I a Woman, to highlight the social harm that visual bias does to people, especially people of from underrepresented groups. So combating visual bias in AI, mostly coming from human bias, from historical data, is an important area of research, and many researchers are working on this issue. So that's one aspect of not seeing. Sometimes is not because of our visual attention, it's because of our own bias. But on the other hand, sometimes not seeing can be profoundly important. And this touches on another aspect and another challenge of vision, which is privacy. In many settings, whether we're talking about healthcare, surveillance, worker safety environment monitoring, privacy is as important as seeing, protecting the privacy. This is a very profound issue. It's not just a technical issue, but on the technical side, there is a lot of work we can do. Because I personally work in healthcare, my lab has been working in privacy computing or privacy machine learning. There are, for example, in computer vision, there are methods from face blurring to dimensionality reduction to body masking to federated learning, homomorphic encryption. I forgot to write here also differential privacy algorithms. These are the work my lab has been doing in the past few years. One of my favorite work actually is not led by me, but by Juan Carlos Nieblas, when he was at Stanford, and this is a hardware-software approach, combined hardware-software approach for visual recognition to do complex visual activity recognition with privacy in mind. So here's the thing. If this is a no privacy protected video, let's say I want to recognize this kid pushing the block, and this is a typical video you get from your home cameras, for example. But what if you do want to recognize or track the safety of this kid without revealing or by protecting the privacy? Can you imagine we have a lens that gives you images like this? For human eyes, we cannot recognize there is a kid pushing the block. But so it does achieve privacy, but it doesn't help if we cannot recognize what's going on. But this lens is paired with an algorithm that can actually recognize, or by smart learning of the filters, what is the activity that achieves both the purpose of privacy as well as visual recognition. And this is exactly what Juan Carlos and his students and collaborators did. This is the hardware lens they used or they created, but together with the lens, there is an algorithm that reverses the filter and understands only the activity category, not the reversal of the pixel, so it recognizes what the action is. And this is, to me, one of the potential applications of privacy-protected computer vision. So for this part, I give you some examples of work in my lab and someone else's lab to show you that we do need to consider, so vision is powerful, computer vision is powerful to help us to see what humans don't even see. But we do need to consider issues like bias and privacy because AI can amplify or exacerbate many of the profound issues that plagued humanity for ages, way beyond AI's history. So we must commit to study, forecast, and guide AI's impact on people and society in a multidisciplinary approach. And many colleagues and students contributed to this part of the talk. Last, let's talk about building AI to see what humans want to see. And this is really shifting the narrative of AI to a much more positive and constructive narrative. And I think this is a very timely topic because if you open any news media, Twitter feed, the Facebook feed today, the very negative narrative has filled our airwaves and our internet. So as AI scientists, how do we go about thinking about this? One of the major negativity of AI, which I think is fair and we should really consider seriously, is this talk about jobs. Is as AI becomes more powerful, this machine is going to replace humans, from truck drivers to radiologists. And that would, and history has told us that as technology shifts and disrupts economy, we go through a sometimes very painful, possibly even violent period of social economic changes. And as AI scientists, we might be part of the changing force leading humanity into that kind of struggle. So while we think about jobs, and I'll talk a little more later, actually in my research, especially my healthcare research, I live in the opposite world. The opposite world is we actually have a labor shortage. So by this year, 2023, America lacks at least 1, if not 3 million nurses taking care of our patients. We have a acceleratingly aging population where the caretaker to elders ratio is decreasing rapidly. And for those of you who understand the socioeconomic dynamics, the caretakers do not participate in the GDP, and they tend to be women and people of color. So there is profound social issues already in labor shortage and the care, hospitality industry. So instead of thinking about AI replacing human capabilities, I would love to advocate and really encourage all of us to believe and work on AI augmenting human capabilities. And here's an example. Back to healthcare. As many things that modern health medicine has brought us, there's actually a lot of dark spaces of healthcare. What do I mean by dark? I mean those spaces that when the patient or the elderly or the chronically sick or the young infant need human care, we don't have enough caretakers watching them 24/7. Or when we are in surgery room, we need constant monitoring of the instrument. We don't have enough people. Or we're in pharmaceutical settings that we need very careful dispatch and organization of medicines. Sometimes we don't have enough people. So these are all the dark spaces of healthcare. So about 10 plus years ago, with the self-driving car industry blossoming at Stanford, my colleagues and I started to push a new way of thinking about computer vision in healthcare delivery called ambient intelligence for healthcare. The idea is that we use smart sensors and the back-end modern machine learning algorithm to glean health critical insights. 2 years ago, we actually published a review article in Nature summarizing a number of our work in this ambient intelligence space in healthcare. I'll just give you a couple of vignettes of what we did. Here's one project, hand hygiene. We started this project before COVID. Everybody thought it was boring. It turned out to be such an important project. So it turns out hand hygiene is really critical to reduce hospital-acquired infection. Most of you are too young to even have been to a hospital, but hospital-acquired infection kills 3 times as many Americans as cars on the road every year. And lack of proper hand hygiene by clinicians who hop from patient room to patient room, carrying the pathogens from room to room, is one of the most critical problems in healthcare. And it's very, very hard to monitor. Till today, most of the solution is to hire a human monitor standing in the hallway with a clipboard and checking on healthcare hand hygiene practice. This is just too expensive, too biased, and not sustainable. RFID technology, it has been tried, but it's not specific. We do vision. We know that you need to understand the actual human posture and human activities. So we work with Stanford Children's Hospital and piloted these sensors. We use actually Connect sensors, depth sensors, to just put them in front of the gel dispensers and look at hand hygiene activities by nurses and doctors, and of course in the back end is a deep learning algorithm. It's actually ComNet based for action detection. And what we learned is, if this is the ground truth, our algorithm, automatic algorithm, performs really well compared to the ground truth, whereas human monitors do not perform nearly as well. Another example is in the ICUs. It turned out that ICU is where patients fight for life and death. This is, if the healthcare system takes up about 18% of American GDP, ICU alone takes up 1% of the entire country's GDP. This is extremely expensive, both in terms of cost as well as in terms of human lives. You want the patients to recover as fast and as well as possible. And one of the important interventions to help the patients is proper mobility. ICU patients tend to be in the bed, not moving, but you actually order these to get them so they can recover very well. How do you measure mobility? If a doctor says this patient needs to be moved 4 times a day, who is monitoring that? How are they moving? How do we automate or monitor this process? And this is the project we did. It's basically is another collaboration with multiple hospitals at Stanford as well as Utah. This is a floor map of an ICU unit. Every orange dot is a Connect sensor. And in this case, we did a pilot on the 4 activity classification and detection algorithm, where we look at getting out of bed, getting in bed, getting out of chair, getting in chair. And all of you would appreciate this is highly cluttered space, highly occluded, and we have to do, just the object classification. Of course, we are ongoing. We're doing far beyond 4 classes, but these are the kind of applications we can use in the ICUs of activity recognition. Last but not the least, it's not just hospitals. This kind of ambient intelligence technology can be taken to homes. In fact, during COVID time, it became really obvious that smart home care is critical for seniors, for chronically sick. We can use computer vision to actually do many kinds of critical home care, such as early infection detection, mobility pattern understanding, sleep pattern understanding, and diet. So these are all, I did not get into all these details. We have projects, actually we have a collaboration with the country of Thailand in the home care project. So last but not the least, as I work in healthcare, in aging population, and also in my basic science work, one of my dreams is still personal robotic assistance. Because I think ambient intelligence can only go so far. As as the world population ages, one day we really could imagine personal robots augmenting doctors, clinicians, family members, not replacing. Well, that is a very nice dream, but here's the reality of today's robots, right? So I think this is a pretty ambitious project of a robot putting a box on the floor. So robotic research is very exciting, and there has been a lot of very good progress if we look at skill level tasks and short horizon goals, especially combined with reinforcement learning, deep RL, and all this. We have seen a lot of good progress. But those of us who have come with a bit of history in AI, I do see today's robotic learning research a little bit in this pre-ImageNet era, where most of the experiments are quite anecdotal, are individual lab-based, small scale, and a lax standard benchmark and a relatively standardized North Star for researchers. So if one day our goal is to create personal robots, we have to recognize the world that the robots will be living in is much more ecologically complex, is dynamic, has large variabilities of scenes, it's deeply interactive and social, and it's intrinsically multitasking. So how do we push robotic learning towards this kind of ecological settings? Well, we are inspired by what we have seen from computer vision and NLP research, where large real-world ecological data sets and benchmark North Star tasks have pushed these fields. And so in a recent effort in our lab, we've been focusing on a new North Star for robotic learning, which is an ecological robotic learning environment and a large and diverse set of activities. And that is the recent work we have published and is still ongoing called Behavior, benchmark for everyday household activities in virtual, interactive, and ecological environment. So what is behavior? I'm going to explain this in a little more details, but I do want to go back to the value I propose, which is very much augmenting humans, not replacing humans. So when we think about household robots, I want to ask you what you want the robot to help you with. For example, would you like the robot to help you with cleaning the kitchen floor? Okay, I think most of you said yes. Okay, what about shoveling snow in Toronto? Yes, right, not breaking back. What about folding laundry? Yeah, okay, especially graduate students. What about cooking breakfast? Okay, I'm getting a couple of head shakes. Okay, what about opening Christmas gifts? So this shows that we do need to think a little deeply about what we want robots to help us and what we want to do our research, like which direction should push our research. So before we put together this behavior benchmark, we did a very large scale human user testing on Amazon Mechanical Turk for 1,400 human subjects, asking them the same question we just asked you. We got from the government data thousands of daily activity tasks that humans do in America, in Europe, and we try to expand to the more diverse populations. And we use these candidate sets of around 3,000-ish or 2,000 plus tasks and ask humans to tell us what they want robots to help. And it turned out there is a rank. Most of humans want cleaning help. Most of humans don't need robots to open their Christmas gift or play squash or do those things. We can also Disney this and see these clusters. So the bottom line is we put together 1,000 tasks that are ranked highest for humans that want the robots to help. Now that we have the list of tasks, we want to get into the environment. So we scanned 50 large-scale real-world environments, from office to restaurants to homes to gardens to all these places, and we start to want to build a large-scale robotic learning environment. Last but not the least, we start curating thousands and thousands of 3D object assets, and which includes many different properties, whether it's fluid or soft materials or cookable, change of state, or just many different properties that we listed there. And now all this is ready. We want to build a simulation environment for robotic learning. And I don't need to convince this audience probably that simulation is critical for robotic learning. It's fast, it's reproducible, it's safe. And the best thing about simulation is you can generate infinite amount of data. And of course, there has been incredible progress in simulation in proposing robotic simulation environments, and many of these environments are really very successful and has done a lot of good work. And in our particular case, with the behavior team at Stanford, we collaborate with NVIDIA's Omniverse team and put together this simulation environment called OmniGibson that aims at 3 levels of realism: physics, perception, and interaction. And this is the example of the physical realism from thermal, transition machines, lighting, reflective fluid, deformability, transparency. We also tested with a user study on the perceptual realism of OmniGibson, or the behavior simulator, and we scored quite high compared to existing simulators. And of course, we also strive to be, have the interaction to be as physically realistic as possible. This is a large table. I'm going to just pretty much skip this. If you are interested in the details of behavior, we published this core paper last year, also highlighting on how diverse and complex and ecological our behavior benchmark is compared to other robotic learning environments. I'm going to skip this. So at this point, we're very, very busy at Stanford actually using behavior to do a whole number of research. Given time, I'm actually not going to go through it. I do have slides. I'll just use this one slide to say that we have one project on benchmarking the state-of-the-art algorithm on behavior. The good news is that we all do very badly, so there is a lot of room to improve. We're also working on various different kind of both reinforcement learning as well as robotics and language, robotics and vision projects for learning these behavior tasks. We're also doing multisensory behavior, including sounds and haptics. We're also using this behavior environment to do cognitive science, including human EEG study. And we're also collaborating with economists to push the socio-economic questions about quantifying economic values of household robots. So there's a whole bunch of research going on built upon this behavior environment. So let me fast forward. So this is all the robotics stuff. Well, we also actually have a real robot working on Sim2Real. It's a mobile manipulation robot at Stanford. So I'm going to skip all this. So this was the last of the part of work that we're doing, which is really focusing on building AI to see and to do what humans wanted to do. And of course, we have a lot of collaborators. So putting together all these values, I want to stress that in this historical moment of AI debate, it is so important that we not only have our scientific North Stars, we also do AI research with the North Star of benefiting the human society. And the 3 pillars of human-valued AI or human-centered AI for me is that focusing on making sure we understand and forecast and guide the societal impact of AI. We focus our work on augmenting humans, not replacing humans. And we continue to build this technology so that it's inspired by human intelligence. And with this, Stanford launched 4 years ago the Human-Centered AI Institute, where faculty from all walks of life, from all disciplines, have come to lead this institute, from philosophy department to law school to medical school to humanities to neuroscience to political science and to economics. At HAI, we do digital economy. My work with the robots is actually a collaboration with Professor Eric Brynjolfsson. We also have a dedicated center of foundation model led by Percy Liang, not only looking at the technology, but also looking at the industry norms, the ethical framework of large language models. We actually have a review process for all HAI research on the human impact. We work with the courses, undergraduate and graduate courses, to embed ethics into our CS and AI courses. We also expand our education beyond the walls of Stanford and educate lawyers, business leaders, journalists, reporters. And last but not the least, we work with the policymakers. We're constantly in Washington, D.C., informing policymakers. Stanford led the lobbying, successful lobbying of the National AI Research Resource, which is a cloud task force, where President Biden put together a 12-people advisory task force to plan out America's AI research cloud. I was one of the members of this task force. So you can see that not only we're working on technology, we're working on making a positive impact to our society. And all this truly is centered around this belief that AI is so exciting, and it really is time to do this kind of human-centered AI as much as possible. So thank you so much.
So thanks for the great presentation. I really appreciate your research on how to apply AI for the healthcare and privacy. But my question is that what do you think the key challenges on applying AI algorithms in this privacy and the healthcare, and how can we formulate these challenges as a machine learning problem, for example, future detection or like a small object detection in the healthcare? Thanks.
Yeah, great question. So frankly, a lot of the key challenges are human challenges. I think building trust is one of the most critical and difficult, hardest challenge. We go into the hospital, we're immediately receiving just suspicion of intentions. For example, especially nurses, they would question the bossware, right? Are you here to monitor us? Because we're at the the doctors are arrogant and they always yell at us that you put a technology here, even if the doctor is not practicing hand hygiene, we the nurses are the ones getting yelled at. So a lot of this is human. A lot of this is the lack of communication. Technologists barge into the door of the hospital and tell them, we know what's going on, we know the future, you guys are all outdated, you just listen to us. These kind of attitude do not facilitate human trust and human collaboration. So I'm saying all this because there's no technical solution to this. It's a human problem that needs to be solved by humans. Beyond this, if you can't open the door, and this is what I have experienced, you go into healthcare, you see a buffet of exciting technical challenges. For example, one of the most fundamental challenge in applications like healthcare is long tail and out of sample problem, right? You just don't get thousands of medical errors in your training data set. I mean, hopefully you never get any, but how do you deal with this kind of long tail problem? That's one technical challenge. And then privacy, we've looked at, for example, differential privacy is extremely slow. So how do you speed that up? and this kind of vision-based computing, privacy computing, is still early. These lenses, for example, coarse activity recognition, you can do it. You can write a beautiful paper, but by the time you need fine-grained, we still haven't worked out these technical challenges. So there is actually a whole buffet of interesting problems. But you solve the human problem first, because you have to open the door and establish the trust for collaboration. Kira.
Okay, so I guess I want to talk about the augmentation part. So of course, the ability to augment, human vision and skills can have major impact and improve society as a whole. I'm wondering to what extent we ought to also be thinking about challenging humans so that while we can augment their skills, we also want to make sure that they still maintain them. In other words, just as an example, right? 10 years ago, we would have to learn how to navigate, a city using our intelligence. Now all we need is Google Maps. We don't even need to know what city we're in. We can just go where we need to go, but the minute GPS is gone, it's over, right? So maybe 200 years ago, we could survive, right, exactly. So how, while we can provide crutches and augment, humans, and let's say we can get to the point where there are no surgical errors because everything is taken care of, right? How do we make sure that the essential skills that are being augmented are not, they fade away because simply somebody else can do it?
Yeah, welcome to the great debate of education and AI today, right? How many K-12 teachers have freaked out because of ChatGPT because their students are no longer writing essays? So you are touching on the profound debate of our society is fundamentally is humans' relationship with our tools. If you look in history, the relationship between our tools have profoundly changed our skill set. Who can do farming in this room? 100 years ago, 95% of human populations are farmers. We've completely lost that skill. Bad or good? We need to debate about it. If we throw me on an island, I think I'll be dead in 3 days because I don't know the cactus alive, let alone farming. But you're totally right. How far do we go? And also, there's more profound things because as we cede some of the skills to machines, what impact do we have to the entire human agency? It's not the skills, it's the human agency. It's, including the organization of our society. For example, our political structure will be profoundly impacted when humans and machines have a different relationship. So frankly, I'm not going to give you answers. I don't have all the answers, but what I do see, and this is where I think University of Toronto is as much of a pioneer as Stanford University, is that we have to have these multidisciplinary think tank and research centers to work on this. At HAI, we have a deep collaboration with the School of Education right now. In fact, it's one of our biggest partners is we believe AI and education from K to skilling, all the way to worker skilling, reskilling, is a huge technical policy societal issue. And that's also human computing, computer interaction. HCI plays a really profound role in this debate, right? Well, how do we collaborate with machines? So good questions, and I think Toronto can have this kind of research and discussions.
Hi, I also appreciate your comments about multidisciplinary because I'm a political science grad who fell into tech and I feel like now maybe I have a unique voice to contribute working in this kind of space. But my question is around the public conversation right now. It's very, AI is going to save us, or AI is going to extinct, we're going to be extinct because of AI. Curious how you are feeling in this moment and where you think, what you think the way forward is, and particularly how a research community can play a role in that way forward.
Yeah. So to be honest, I hope nobody tweets what I say. I think our research community right now is the silent majority. What we hear in the public discourse, the loudest voices tend to come from both extremes, from the distinction of humanity, human race, to a utopia, right? So I think there needs to be a much healthier public discourse that's much more nuanced. For example, hot button topic, regulation. How do we regulate AI? The airwave is filled with pausing AI research. I mean, everybody in this room knows this is just crazy talk. How are we going to pause AI research, right? We never pause theoretical physics. We never pause biology just because there's bioweapons. We never pause chemistry. What we should be talking about is a very thoughtful regulatory framework where rubber meets the road, which is where human users are directly impacted by AI. For example, FDA regulatory framework, or I don't know what's Canada's equivalent, is on drugs and food. There is already a pragmatic framework. I'm not saying that's perfect, but if there is AI application that touches on drugs and food, we should be looking at how that should be regulated, rather than these kind of very noisy, extreme discussions on pausing. So that's one example of the public discourse. Another example of the public discourse is this whole thing about AI ruining humanity. Frankly, humanity is going to ruin humanity. Humanity is always on the verge of ruining humanity. If you look at human history, we're the ones who started wars. We're the ones who create social inequality. We're the ones who have polarized, distribution of wealth. So I think it's really important that we focus on making a positive change in human endeavor, rather than just in a way, sometimes I feel blaming AI. AI is made by humans. Last but not the least, this is something I have to say, it's a little bit of a growing, coming of age, even for myself, as old as I am, is that there is value to engage, especially for researchers like you, to engage in a thoughtful discourse with policymakers as well as business leaders. I think we technologists tend to just love the codes we write and the papers we write, but they really need our voice. Otherwise, they're just hearing the extreme voices. Your local and national, federal policymakers need to hear what you know about AI, because you know far more about AI in a far more thoughtful and objective way than the noises they've been fed. So it's actually, there is a critical role that researchers should make in this time of the history.
Thank you, Professor, for the insights. I have a question. Based on your research and the contribution which you have for policymaking, what do you think should be the next steps for rationalizing and practicing augmented collective intelligence as these tools and research which is going on comes to the mainframe for societies and communities to adopt?
What do you mean by nationalizing?
I mean, not nationalize, in terms of utilize it in communities and like you gave example of the work which is being done for healthcare. So tomorrow when human and these machines will work together, what should be the steps towards making them more rational so that they can be adopted easily?
Well, I do think we need to build guardrails. I do think guardrails come through both law as regulatory framework as well as governance norms, industry norms. For example, I think the genomics community has been, they had the Asiloma conference back in 1970s. I think this is why HAI exists. I don't think technologists today should be ostrich with their head in the sand and pretending we're only making technology. I think every step of our research, we should be inviting multidisciplinary collaborators. When I do the healthcare work, the first year or two, we just wanted to get sensors there to understand what's going on. As soon as we got sensors, one sensor on the wall in the children's hospital, I got scared because I realized, my God, we're now collecting data. Even if after passing IRB, I realized IRB, this is beyond IRB. We immediately gathered together law scholars, bioethicists, and ethicists, and formed a self-governing oversight committee because I feel like this is beyond me. I don't know how to handle what the technology can do now. It's beyond my imagination. So I think there is this norm we need to form, which is respect the self-governance and work with national regulatory frameworks as well.
Thanks for the great talk, by the way. Do you think a part of the challenge is how specialized our education is? In that there's this huge gap basically between technical fields like natural sciences, formal sciences, and humanities. Do you think that's a part of the challenge, in that us researchers in AI, we basically don't really study anything from the humanities?
Yeah, I think you touched on a core problem. This is why you saw I rushed through one of the slides, is that we are putting embedded ethics into our technical courses, right? Even my CS 231N, I'm sure some of you know, we got lectures on these topics. I also think the other way around is important. We need to educate humanities and social scientists. At Stanford, we use the term bilingualism. We really, really need bilingual students. These are students who become entrepreneurs in AI with an ethical framework, as well as become lawmakers with a technical understanding. And at Stanford, this is why we're going out of the way to educate the workforce. We invite journalists back. We invite CEOs and CTOs back. We invite congressional staffers, as well as freshman class congressmen and women back to educate. And students, I do think it's really important.
Thank you very much. I have a question picking up on your comment on humanity ruining humanity. And, I wanted to hear your perspectives. You're on the Biden task force. There's a lot of talk that's happening on national levels, international levels. But do you think that a global task force on regulating AI is needed, and would it work? As my first question. And my second question being is your comment on the researchers being a silent majority right now in the discourse on AI. What voice is not heard right now, and you're concerned about that, and you would like more from that community to speak up?
Okay, so first question, do we need a global task force? I don't know if it's in the form of a task force, but we need both national level and international level AI governance. We absolutely do. So here's an extreme example, nuclear. We actually had global governance. It is complex, and it's not like everybody are friends, but we still, I'm not saying it's perfect, but we still managed. So I think AI is so horizontal, we are heading that way, and it is happening right now. OECD and a lot of the organizations are looking at this, but not enough. And frankly, I don't know how much Canada and US talks. And I think this is probably the most two friendly, countries. So we need a lot more. We're trying a little bit. We're working with the State Department, for example, HAI, and I actually went to the State Department, gave a talk to the entire international embassy of the entire U.S. and trying to, create that dialogue, but there needs to be more. On your second question about the silent majority who should be heard, well, okay, I'll share with you what I think at Stanford, and I actually think UT and Vector plays a huge role. I do think voices like ours should be heard. Unfortunately, we don't create that headlines like, humanity is ending kind of, but go out there, put out your research, be engaged in thoughtful policy discussions. We also at HAI, frankly, host journalist days, reporter days. I don't know if Vector does that. I think have a thoughtful way of managing media relationship and create that kind of ongoing dialogue is very important. I also think as an institute, lifting the voices of women, of people, of underrepresented groups, lifting the research that are not in the media glamour, like it's not the next Transformer. I love Transformers, but if you are doing research in healthcare, if you're doing research in climate, if you're doing institutionally, there's an opportunity to promote these kind of research, get these voices out there. It is important.
Right. Thank you for the great talk. Your conversation earlier about collaboration and research reminded me of something I read the other day, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. So essentially in the article, the author was making the case that over the past few years, the general trend in the development of AI has been that people are essentially using larger models to leverage more compute in order to achieve better results. And he was concerning that because of this, we have come to the point where it's so expensive to train like any kind of like large model. And as a result, it seems like the ability to sort of conduct cutting edge research has become like more and more concentrated in like a few entities that have the computing resources. So I was just wondering, do you think there is any concern and any merit in that concern? Or do you think that alarmism is sort of misguided?
Great question. I'm curious. Raise your hand if you need more GPUs. Do you think? Okay. I'm surprised I didn't see 100% of your hand. Because if I asked this question at Stanford, everybody would raise their hand. So I think it is actually a true problem, because much of AI's advance right now has become a resource game. And there are several dimensions to look at this. One is that, again, I don't know Canada. I know Vector is very special, but I'll tell you, not a single university in America can train a ChatGPT. In fact, all university GPUs combined in America cannot train a single ChatGPT. So there has to be a level of government resourcing in the public sector that is urgent. This is what HAI is leading in our lobby in Washington, D.C., is that we have to recognize this moment that if you want a healthy ecosystem where students and future entrepreneurs, future educators, future researchers are properly resourced, we really cannot allow compute to be only concentrated in the big tech. And that is a genuine issue we need to solve. In the meantime, it is also important to recognize the world of AI research is not owning like mega transformers trained by mega data sets, right? Like it is also the moment that we actually do creative research. For example, I'm very proud of the healthcare research my team does, which is, it's impossible to do it in a big tech. our robotics work is frankly behavior, is the kind of work that we put multi-year patience and just multi-collaboration. It's still the kind of innovative work that industry might not be able to do. So I don't think we should despair. Even with the limited resource, we have incredible opportunities. So I think we do need to solve this problem in multi-approach, our own innovation as well as pushing the governments to resource public sector properly.
Does anybody have any other questions? Time for one more, so here you go.
Thanks for the great talk. You briefly mentioned income inequality before. I was wondering if you have any comments about whether you think going forward, AI is going to have a winner-take-all dynamic, just like big tech in the past.
Yeah, so I'm definitely not an expert in this area. So in HAI, we have a digital economy lab, and I think income inequality and just social inequality, economic inequality in general is going to be exacerbated. For example, the great digital divide, of the world. Look at global south and the different populations and the access to, whether it's network access or AI resource access is going to exacerbate this. And digital economy itself, right now, our GDP doesn't even account for a lot of the digital economy, and this whole, like automation, it's also gonna really upset the current models. For example, one great mystery now is of the past 20 years. Knowledge workers are very elite workers. They're high earners and all that. The GPT technology is disrupting knowledge workers in a very profound way. And how is that gonna, disrupt the whole economic landscape? We don't know. And then we're talking about the low-income population in this AI. As wealth is concentrating, they're at the receiving end of everything. And how is that going to impact them from their education to their access to resource to, their income level? We don't know. So we worry a lot about that. This is why, again, HAI, as an AI institute, we have an economic lab because this is so profound.